Hello, everyone. My name is Claire Jones, and I offer systemized business solutions to arts organizations and small business builders so that they can grow and scale their businesses without burning out. This is the next video in a series where I go over some of the business tips, tools, and strategies that I use both in my own business and those in the businesses of my clients. And I go over all of these helpful things that make business a little easier, make life a little easier. And so I did a poll in my mastermind group last week or the week before, asking what people would like to see more of when I do these videos. And the top answer was more coaching and managing people videos. So this time around, I'm going to do a deeper dive into some of the topics that I've already been talking about in my mastermind group, which means managing people, delegating, stuff like that. I went over Kenneth Blanchard's The 1 Minute Manager book series. He has the original 1 Minute Manager, and then he also has a 1 Minute Manager Meets the Monkey. They are books that I highly recommend when you are interacting with pretty much anyone, as well as how you manage yourself when it comes to projects and goals and deliverables and that kind of stuff. And so today I want to introduce to you The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier, something like that. And this is an excellent book that does a deeper dive into how exactly to delegate effectively and not end up micromanaging the people that you're working with. I know from experience, I absolutely hate being micromanaged. I prefer autonomy over management, and that's why I'm a bad employee. That's why I'm my own boss, because most bosses don't allow me the freedom and allow me the autonomy that I work best with. And so I first came across the coaching habit when I was working within a dog company as their business development director. And I was basically helping the leadership, the CEO, founder, as well as his financial operations officer, to better run the company, better manage the company, better lead the company. And they were running into the problem of running into fires on a day-to-day basis that they had to rush around and put out. And they felt like they needed to do everything themselves. The financial operations officer, she was also the operations officer of the company, and she found herself micromanaging a lot of the employees that were on the team. And it annoyed everyone involved, ultimately, both the employees who were being micromanaged and the operations officer herself. Everyone was just annoyed all around. And so I was going about how to research these kinds of more delegation, more I'm not in charge of thinking for you tactics when it comes to leadership. And so the coaching habit was one of the resources that I found that really succinctly tied up these frameworks in a way that was easily understandable. And they have worksheets and they have online videos that you can use and view in order to deepen your learning of these concepts. And so it's really accessible, really easy to absorb, really easy to implement too at the end of the day. It's a relatively short read. It's not that big of a book, and it's really useful. So today I wanted to go over the coaching habit and how there are questions that Michael produces in this book really correlate to the questions that I use when I'm coaching clients as well. And if you've ever heard of the book Quiet Leadership by David Rock, that's another great book that I recommend for these types of concepts. And it really aligns closely with the frameworks that he proposes too, frameworks that he has found over years of neuroscientific research. And so this is a field of leadership practices that is very well aligned with a lot of different perspectives in the field. So let's dive on in. So you need a coaching habit when you're managing and coaching people. You can do this for yourself. You can do this in your community groups. You can do this in your workplaces. You can even do this in your family, anywhere where you're interacting with people in a social context and working together towards a common goal, essentially. And so there are 6 essential leadership styles, according to Daniel Goldman. He is the psychologist and journalist who popularized the concept of emotional intelligence in his Harvard Business Review article, Leadership That Gets Results. And he suggested that coaching was one of these 6 essential leadership styles. And it has been shown to have a markedly positive impact on performance, climate, culture, and the bottom line. And so you've probably already tried and failed to be a coach in these positions. And even if you are trained to coach your employees, to coach your team members, you likely didn't spend much time figuring out how to translate these new insights when it comes to being trained into action. So when you got back to the office, got back to the group, the status quo flexed its impressive muscles and you got into a headlock, and soon you were doing things exactly the way you'd done them before. So how can you actually implement these learnings in a practical and easy way? And so it's not that hard, really. It should be a daily informal act, not an occasional formal coaching time event. And so this goes along the lines with the 1 Minute Manager teachings, is that you should only really spend 1 minute at a time addressing this kind of stuff. You can do 1 minute check-ins with your team members, with your colleagues, with your employees, and it doesn't really have to be a huge formal performance review event, or just make it a daily informal act and just get into the routine and the habit of it. And when you build a coaching habit, you can more easily break out of the vicious cycles that plague workplaces, which is creating overdependence, getting overwhelmed, and becoming disconnected. So if you're creating overdependence by micromanaging people, you've trained your people to become excessively reliant on you, a situation that turns out to be disempowering both for them and frustrating for you. And then as an unwelcome bonus, because you've been so successful in creating this dependency habit, you now have too much work to do, and you actually may become a bottleneck in the system. And I covered this concept too when I went over the 1 Minute Manager concepts as well in my mastermind group. And cycle number 2, you get overwhelmed with all of the work, all of the micromanaging, all of the tasks that you feel you need to pick up for other people, and you become disconnected. So you have to help people do more of the work that has impact and meaning. And the more we do work that has no real purpose, all of this micromanaging, all of this, what do they call it? When they give homework that isn't really filler, there's a term for it. I can't think of it at the moment. The less engaged and motivated we are, and the less engaged we are, the less likely we are to find and create new great work and innovate. So you really need to build this into a habit. And so the questions that he recommends that you incorporate into the way that you interact with people is, number 1, the kickstart question. What is on your mind? This really targets the topic of what they're coming to you for. And so maybe you are coaching for performance. If they identify a topic that is about addressing and fixing a specific problem or challenge, it's everyday stuff. You can coach for performance. Or if you're coaching for development, it's about turning the focus from the issue to the person dealing with the issue. So how can you coach for their personal development instead of coaching for that specific problem? And the focus can call you forward to learn, improve, and grow rather than just getting something sorted out. And a challenge might be typically centered on a project, a person, or a pattern of behavior. So this question really identifies what exactly the challenge is and what approach this person wants to take toward that challenge. So is it a project that's coming up? Is it a people problem, or is it a pattern problem? Are you looking at patterns of behavior or ways of working that you want to change? And so this is the area where you're most likely to find coaching for development conversations instead of coaching for performance, which is specific problems with people or projects. And so this is a great starting question. Number 2 is the awe question. So, and what else? AWE. the awe question. And there are 3 reasons why it has the impact that it does. More options can lead to better decisions. You rein yourself in and you buy yourself time. So by asking them to further this topic that they brought up in the first question, you can really create more options in their minds and get them to think about the solutions rather than you telling them what the solutions are right off the bat. Again, that gives them more autonomy, and it fires up the neurons within their brain. And you're actually creating new neural networks within their brain by asking them to think about it instead of just telling them a solution that you know yourself. And so you need to remember that the first answer someone gives you is almost never the only answer, and it's rarely the best answer. So you can really dive into what the other options are with this question, and you can tame the advice monster. So even if it is the wrong advice, and it often is, giving advice feels more comfortable than the ambiguity of asking a question. So this is a intriguing, although difficult exercise to watch yourself with and see how quickly you get triggered into wanting to give advice. And this gives yourself more freedom in not having to come up with all the answers yourself. And it empowers your team members to think for themselves and come up with solutions that resonate more for them. And so even though we don't really know what the issue is or what's going on for the person, we can't really give them the answer she needs. And you buy yourself more time. So when you're not entirely sure of what's going on and you need just a moment or two to figure things out, the awe question will buy you a little extra time as well. And so just stay curious, stay genuine, ask it one more time just to deepen it a little bit, recognize the success when it happens, and then move on when it's time. And so the next question that you can use to follow up is the focus question. So what's the real challenge here for you? This is when you're really getting into the nitty gritty and really identifying what the problem is at hand. Because the first problem that they bring you often is a surface problem. It's usually a symptom of an underlying cause. And so the focus question, what's the real challenge here for you, really dives in deep and gets to that underlying cause or maybe underlying symptoms, but it dives in deeper so that you can dig into it and really figure out what the challenge is at hand. And so this avoids several things. 1, it avoids you working on the wrong problem. 2, it avoids you doing the work that your team should be doing. And 3, you avoid the work not getting done in the first place. So this is the question that will help slow down the rush to action so that you spend time solving the real problem, not just the first problem. It's no accident that it's phrased the way that it is, because it builds to be such a useful question, building from what's the challenge to what's the real challenge here to what's the real challenge here for you. It keeps the question personal and makes the person you're talking to wrestle with their struggle and what they need to do in order to figure it out. So you get yourself out of the issue, you get yourself out of the driver's seat with this question. And so maybe you can really identify what the big challenge is here and then have more useful steps forward. And so the next question is going to be the foundation question. And this is basically how to be a grown-up. And you are asking, what do you want? What do you want out of this? And so what you need to do is define an adult to adult relationship as one in which you are able to ask for what you want, knowing that the answer may be no. How do you know if you don't ask? So even if you do know what you want, it's often hard to ask for it. And so this gives them an opportunity to be courageous enough to ask for what they want out of this challenge. So sometimes the responsibility for unheard requests rests with the people that you're asking. and they're pursuing their own agendas, or their confirmation bias means that they hear something else than what you're saying, or they're fake listening and not really paying attention at all. So you can see how this kind of cuts through the fog and be like, all right, so now that we've identified the real challenge here for you, what do you want now that we've identified that? What do you want and what do you need as a result? So this is really helpful to ask when you are recognizing that the need gives you a better understanding of how you might address it. So excellent question. The next question that you can ask is the lazy question. And this is really helpful, again, with removing the responsibility from you. So ask, how can I help? Because you can offer a lot of stuff that's not actually helpful to them in the moment, because they can identify like what the challenge is, what they want out of the challenge, and then how you can help with the challenge. Because maybe sometimes they just want an ear, sometimes they just want someone to listen to them. Sometimes they're looking for advice. Sometimes they're looking for resources or a referral or, support in completing the project. But you can better offer what they're wanting if you know what they're wanting, essentially. So the anxiety, you avoid being the rescuer, essentially, and you're avoiding taking on their monkeys and basically avoiding the ego trip of believing that you know what is best for them and you know how to best help them before they can even identify that for themselves. And so, also, great question. And then finally, the strategic question. If you are saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? So let's be clear. What exactly are you saying yes to? And what are you saying no to in order to get this done? A yes is nothing without the no, because it gives its boundaries and form. And in fact, you're uncovering two types of no answers here, the no of omission and the no of commission. So the first type of no applies to the options that are automatically eliminated by your saying yes. If you say yes to this meeting, for example, you're saying no to something else that is happening at the same time as the meeting. Understanding this type of no helps you understand the implications of the decision. That's really what we're identifying here. And the second type of no, the no of commission, is what you're uncovering. So, which is likely to take the conversation to a whole nother level. It's what you now need in order to make the yes happen. It's all too easy to shove another yes into the bag of our overcommitted lives, hoping that in some magical sort of way it will somehow all be accommodated. But this second type of no puts the spotlight on how to create the space and the focus and the energy and the resources that you'll need in order to truly do that yes. So this is super important. And all of these questions have their own purposes, and doing it in this order is a really good way to deepen the conversation and identify what exactly needs to be done in order to solve this challenge that they've come up with. And so also some great strategic questions that you could use instead of, if you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to, is what is our winning aspiration? Put some context into it. Where will we play? Put some boundaries into it. How will we win? Put some differences between the gap between you and others. What capabilities must be in place? What details need to be thought of? What management systems are required? This is really where you get into the nitty gritty of how to help with strategy, essentially. And so the last question that you're doing or giving as a coach in this capacity is the learning question. So what was most useful to you, for you? They start learning, they start creating new neural pathways only when they have a chance to recall and reflect on what just happened. So your job as a manager and a leader is to help create the space for people to have those learning moments. And to do that, you need a question that drives this double loop learning. So what was most useful for you here? And then moving forward, you are better equipped for future conversations with this person. And you can really create those neural networks in their brain and positively reinforce those new neural networks in their brain. So really good stuff here. And it also assumes that the conversation was useful. It asks people to identify the big thing that was most useful to them. It makes it personal. It gives you feedback. It's learning, not judgment. And it reminds people how useful you are to them. So again, you didn't do any of the work for them. You didn't think for them. You didn't give solutions for them. And that's how you can be useful as a coach and a manager with other team members. So these questions are a great lead-in to a lot of the questions that I use in my coaching sessions with people. I use a series of questions to begin the session called the START questions. And this is a various variety of the questions that Michael Stanier proposes in his book. But START, S is for subject, T is for transformation, A is for approach, R is for result, and T is for team up. So subject, what do you want to focus on today? It's very much like the question of what's on your mind. You know, how do you identify what the actual topic is that they want to talk about? What is the subject? What do you want to work on for us to work on with our conversation today? T for transformation. What makes this topic important for you today? What difference will working on this topic make for you? Really dig into the context of what the transformation is needed in this conversation. A for approach, what part of this topic should we focus on? Maybe you can't handle the full topic in that one conversation, but which part would be most helpful to focus on right now? And what about this should we explore to get what you want out of the conversation today? R for result, as we talk about this topic, this problem, this challenge, what would make this conversation helpful? What do you want out of this? What result are you looking for? Very similar to the questions covered in the coaching habit. What practical takeaway do you want by the end of the session, by the end of this conversation? What the next steps would be most helpful for you in this endeavor? And then team up, offer a paraphrase to reconfirm the agreement followed by a confirming question. What I heard was you said that you want to work on this, and this particular topic is important because, and the result that you're looking for is that correct? Did I understand that correctly? Really focus on placement and confirmation here, or offer partnership to the person by asking, how would you like to get started? What approach would you like? What are the next steps? What do you need to do next in order to make this conversation useful for you? And then at the end of the session, I use action planning and accountability questions to really wrap it up and make sure that we have a solid plan for moving forward. One, what practical steps after we've had this conversation do you need to take now? What are the steps that you need to take in the next day, in the next week, in the next month in order to address this challenge that we talked about? How are you going to hold yourself accountable to this? Do you need to put it on a calendar? Do you need to put it on a to-do list? Do you need to put a sticky note in your car to remind yourself? How are you going to hold yourself accountable to this? Because I'm not going to micromanage you on a day-to-day basis. That's not what I'm here for. That's not what I want to do, because I believe in your abilities to hold yourself accountable. What accountability or support do you need from me? Maybe you need me to check in with you weekly to follow up and check in to see how you're doing on this. But I'm not going to check in and day out and make sure that you are doing it, because again, that takes the initiative away from you. That takes the initiative away from your team members if you're doing that. And then they're not as innovative, they're not as creative, and it just doesn't do well for team morale. And then what takeaways do you have? What was most useful to you here? What was your big aha moment? What was the big insight that you had with this conversation? Really dive into those new neural networks, connect the things that haven't been connected before. Sometimes my clients walk away from these conversations and being like, shit, I never thought of that before. Shit, I made a connection that I didn't even know existed between these two things. And those new neural networks are so fragile that you really need to reinforce them and positively reinforce them and make sure that they stick for future reference. So that's pretty much what I wanted to go over today. I hope these questions were helpful for you. If you have any questions about the questions, hit me up, comments, concerns, any feedback that you have for me. I'd love to know if those are landing with you. I hope it was useful. Let me know what was the most useful thing about it for you. Comment below. That would be a great exercise to do with this. And yeah, so that's it. Love you all. Take care. Have a good one. Bye.